We're all very familiar with gems having specific summoned weapons. We're so used to it that when a gem lacks such a weapon, we eagerly wonder what it will eventually turn out to be. However, the ability to summon a weapon may not have been present since the start of gem history. I think it's possible such a feat first arose during the Gem War on Earth. To complicate matters even further, modernized close quarters weapons as we know them may have first arisen around this time as well, due to the puzzling manner in which combat was depicted in the episode The Answer. So let me begin my barrage of speculations about how weaponry evolved during the Gem War. In The Answer, Garnet tells Steven a story that occurred 5,750 years ago, during the early stages of rebellion. There was a curious design choice to make all the combatants, with the exception of Pearl, have no weapons. The gems defending the colony attack with their limbs, as does Rose Quartz herself, who, as we know, happens to have a massive weapon collection, and in flashbacks of later battles, was shown using the pink sword we're all well acquainted with by now. This prompts the obvious question: why the lack of weapons? Blue Diamond knew that the rebellion forces would strike the colony and was prepared for them due to the fortune Sapphire gave, so the lack of weapons isn't due to surprise. The argument that it's simply a visual aesthetic also lacks substance. There's no real reason the silhouettes can't be holding silhouetted weapons, and Rose Quartz is obviously not a silhouette, nor are the rubies. And the fact that Pearl brandishes weapons means the other gems being weaponless isn't simply Steven's imagination conjuring a more sterilized, less violent version of reality either. Thus, we're left with one option. It was a deliberate choice on behalf of the gems involved to fight barehanded. And yet, the flashbacks of the war to follow all showcased weapons being used by both Homeworld and Earth factions, and these weapons are scattered across landscapes formerly used as battlefields to this very day. By this point, you can see what I'm getting at. Perhaps these sorts of tools were not used by Homeworld this far back in time, and Pearl's use of them was actually a novelty. Rose's scabbard and sword may have not even been created as of 5,750 years ago, hence her choice of engaging in bare-handed combat. I know what some of you might be thinking, that sounds rather ridiculous at face value. An advanced spacefaring race bent on expanding their empire and colonizing other planets doesn't have refined, pointy, and sharp objects? However, hear me out, weapons arise out of necessity, and we don't actually know whether other lifeforms opposed gem colonization in the past, or what style of warfare unfolded if this did happen. We also don't know if the Gem War on Earth is the first time there was actual conflict between the gems, and as we know, gems also don't need to kill anything to eat, so therefore pointy, sharp, or blunted objects used to whack or slice other beings may not have been a necessity to create. Basic brawn may have sufficed, assuming it was even needed. Furthermore, perhaps when exceptional force was required, certain technology existed for that purpose. As one example, this mural depicts some sort of weapon we are unfamiliar with, though it is a bit vague whether Rose Quartz is the one using it or whether her opponent is using it on her. And gems do have a variety of abilities, so powers like that of Lapis Lazuli, where an element is controlled, probably also existed back then. Being capable of restructuring the environment is probably a pretty handy ability when you want to colonize new lands. So, the theory I have can be summarized that the rebellious gem forces created and advantageously utilized combat weapons against the Homeworld colonies, after which the Homeworld forces would copy these instruments and the sort of warfare we see in other flashbacks would start to take place. Sure, there's architecture like the Sky Arena that has statues holding melee weapons, but these could have been constructed well after the war started, and the arena itself could have been used as a training ground for gems to get acquainted with wielding weapons. I initially had a hard time accepting this idea as plausible myself, but it's difficult to propose any other sensible explanation for why Rose and the colonizing gems would all fight barehanded in this scene, yet utilize weapons later during the war. Weapons are clearly more effective for combat. They just simply didn't feel like using weapons? That's not a very convincing alternative. And now I come to the idea that Pearl may have very well been the inventor of the sword. When a war between ground troops with roughly equal strength is occurring, appropriate weapons that suit the job can come about, and we know that Pearl is a tinkerer and a masterful mechanic. I think it's a legitimate possibility that Pearl and Rose began creating new tools for combat as they initiated the rebellion, and as of 5,750 years ago, Pearl had already become proficient with bladed weapons, whereas Rose was still not ready to use them. But some of you might object and say, what if Pearl didn't invent weapons, but simply copied what humans were already fighting with? While it's possible, I actually hold the reverse opinion. Gems were the ones who created weapons, and humans would later co-opt them. But some of you might object again. Didn't Pearl have dialogue about adopting the human title of knight and all that junk? Slightly ambiguous dialogue makes that interpretation arise, but it's not technically correct. Let's listen to what it is Pearl specifically states.
It was here that I became familiar with the human concept of being a knight.
Pearl is comparing the mindset she acquired back then to a similar human concept, knighthood. She's not saying she observed knights and adopted that sort of behavior, especially since she states this mindset developed in the Sky Arena. She's simply explaining the state of mind she took on by comparing it to a familiar and easy to understand human concept that Stephen and Connie would be familiar with. That brings me to my next point, the timeline. Knights arose in the 8th century, not over 5,000 years ago. And guess what? The oldest things that could be classified as swords date back to around 5,000 years ago, and these were really rudimentary. But furthermore, Pearl wields small swords, which evolved from rapiers, and rapiers themselves were only designed about 500 years ago. Now yes, the world of Steven Universe is different from ours, obviously. The continents even happen to be shaped slightly differently. Perhaps humans in the Steven Universe did have complex inventions much farther back in time than in real life. But the world of Steven Universe does take place, more or less, in the present day in terms of technology, culture, infrastructure. It's completely analogous to our current world, except for that gem thing. To insist humans were far more technologically adept at material crafting farther back in time means that humans would have had to stall out on technological advancement to an exceptional degree. You could blame the Gem War for this, but even that ended 5,000 years ago, and if anything, should have left remnants of gem technology that could potentially even speed up human technological advancement. So the point is, I simply don't buy that potential explanation, and instead, I think gems were the first to create these sorts of melee weapons we're familiar with, and humans might have co-opted their designs later down in history. Now to change gears somewhat, let's start discussing summon weapons. It logically follows that if my theory on regular weapons is correct, it wouldn't make sense for summon weapons to exist until after the regular weapons they emulate did. And indeed, in the answer, the rubies do not summon gauntlets while trying to protect Sapphire, even though they really should have if they were capable of it. Pearl has described the human-like bodies of gems as similar to holograms with mass, so theoretically they could achieve a plethora of abilities if their mind is capable of it. Manipulating energy to give it mass is a really wide-ranging power with countless applications. Summon weapons may merely be tapping into gem potential that hadn't been considered up to a certain point in gem history. We don't have many flashbacks of the war, and the only instance I can find of a summon weapon used during the war is Rose using her shield, a quote-unquote weapon that makes thematic sense because she's the figurehead who's trying to protect her comrades and the planet. While this does not mean Rose was the first gem to conjure a summon weapon, I think it is plausible, and that's my personal guess. The shield is basically expanding on the bubble ability to create a stronger protective item. Stephen himself was capable of using the defensive bubble effectively long before he was capable of summoning his shield at will. But regardless of whoever it was that first developed the ability to summon a weapon, once the knowledge that it's possible was out there, fighters on both sides would start trying to hone this ability because it is very advantageous. So why so many regular weapons during the war after summon weapons were developed? Were these used by gems not yet capable of summoning a weapon, or were all these used in the earlier battles before summon weapons were a thing? Perhaps, but not necessarily. Even to this day, the crystal gems keep other sorts of weapons around due to specific circumstances.
Never know when you might need one of these.
Regular weapons may have also seen widespread use because battles can last for extended durations of time, and you don't want to run out of energy. Maintaining summon weapons would be more energetically demanding than using an already existing weapon, and Peridot has expressed concerns about energy management even in this very day.
But it's such a significant use of energy compared to the output.
Summon weapons are a skill that persisted on Homeworld to the present day in more combat-oriented gems. Jaspers are warriors and are capable of weapon summoning, for example, while Peridots are technicians, and if they need to engage in combat, they rely on their multi-purpose limb enhancements. As we saw with Steven's own struggles, learning to summon a gem weapon takes mental dedication and effort. Gems who aren't expected to be in combat roles are likely disincentivized from trying to learn to summon weapons. I'd go as far as to speculate that weapon summoning is probably banned for certain kinds of gems. Homeworld, of course, went even further when it comes to technology after the war on Earth ended. No doubt they wanted to prevent such a situation from breaking out in the future, especially since they pretty much lost control of the colony, so they engineered novel anti-gem weaponry after the war. The destabilization technology we've seen serves to efficiently neutralize gems on contact, making them highly effective weapons specifically against other gems. This same sort of technology was also used for effectively imprisoning rogue gems. And of course, the spaceship we saw was pretty flippin' cool too. And I'm sure we'll see plenty more interesting Homeworld technology in the future. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'm aware my theory regarding melee weapon creation rests on specific key details and limited information, but the Crewniverse is usually excellent in regards to making specific details matter and contribute to the world building. But please feel free to point out any mistakes or inconsistencies I may have overlooked, or just post your own ideas on the subject. In other news, Steven Universe is back tomorrow! Everyone get hype! And to all of you watching this video in the future, just recall the hype you did have the day before this two-part premiere aired, and relive that.
If you could only know what we really